like I was saying, um, Tyler Kevin has been with me a long time for several classes, and we've had a lot of good times in that the philosophy discussion. It brings out a lot of the dialogue, doesn't it, Tyler? Yeah,
Yeah.
that sense of uh, bringing on deep ideas. The reason I wanted to have him on is because of that. What I call it the deep idea of the philosophical life. It's one that I've always seen in a lot of spiritual leaders. I've been on this thing lately. I don't like calling just anybody a leader. Like politicians love this. They'll call themselves leaders, and I really do not see that that's leadership. I call it something else. I'm not saying it doesn't make a difference. I'm not saying it's important. I'm not saying anything of the like, but I am saying that leadership is a very sacred term to me, and it means that you're taking people on a very spiritual. It's almost a spiritual journey. If it's not, then I don't know what that is. That's not leadership to me. Like if you just if you lead me onto like a better land or a better opportunity, I don't call that leadership. I call that maybe just, I don't know, helping maybe. I mean, some people would call that leadership. I just don't. I just don't. I'm not very uncomfortable with it. I just think that we ruin the sacredness of leadership, because leadership actually is a very spiritual moving. It leads, I mean, it ignites inspiration, doesn't it? I mean, it changes lives. And that's the reason I wanted to have Tyler on with us today and discuss this, because this is a story that I have not heard. Um, I mean, Tyler's been with me in several courses. I mean, he's completing the minor in philosophy, you were saying. So that's a big deal. Um, but I had never heard this story, and we've been friends for a number of years since he first came into the courses, and I wanted to talk about that today. So I'm just going to actually turn this over. This is Tyler Cavan. He's a great friend of mine and a great thinker, and we've always discussed this idea of how that philosophy, being that love of wisdom, or that using wisdom unto greatness, is the way I'm always thinking about it. That brings up another subject which I've covered before, but changing that kind of around, rather than you're just pursuing wisdom, you're pursuing what wisdom brings you, which is greatness, depth, inspiration, um, a spiritual awakening. And there's where I wanted to lean in on that. So, Tyler, share with, share with us and share with everybody that story about how you came to understand philosophy as being a life transformative pursuit, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on too. Everything that you just said, like the love of wisdom and kind of like that passion and reawakening.
Hmm.
Philosophy initially came to me whenever I first had met you on day one. I was definitely not that person. As a kid, I was very like curious. I was always
Hmm.
asked a little bit more than other kids. And obviously, every kid kind of like is always questioning, seeking like what's going on, all kinds of stuff like that. So I was always like that, and my dad was always kind of like a champion for me. He would always answer my questions, always kind of point out things.
Hmm.
He was a minister as well, so if I ever
Hmm.
had any kind of questions about like faith as well, he would
Hmm.
come out with that and talk about that too. So I initially had started my collegiate career that very first semester with you, with philosophy. And whenever I was booking my classes, I was like, philosophy. It sounds kind of pretentious. It's going to be this, all that kind of
That's
stuff. I was like,
funny. You thought it sounded pretentious.
I was like, yeah,
That's a
what
funny word. Yeah, to add to that. That is funny. I love that.
right. I was like,
It sounds very pretentious.
what exactly is this guy going to be talking about? You know what I mean? It's just kind of stuff like that. So whenever I actually got there the very first week,
It
whenever I
just does. I have to interrupt you there. It does
no,
sound like
it's
a
all right.
pretentious class. I've never thought about that, but it does sound pretentious. Because I'm taking, what are you taking this semester? Well, I've got an introduction to philosophy. You almost have to say it in a certain way, like
It's like,
makes
okay,
it
that's a
even
great block.
yeah, yeah. It's like you want to even be more pretentious in how you answer the question. An introduction to philosophy. You almost change your voice. Go
Exactly.
on like that. Go on with that, please.
But
I'm sorry.
of course, those people who don't understand philosophy is clearly in the cave. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So,
nice.
right,
Explain
so
that. Explain that just for a second. What your reference is. I know it's. I'm going to let everybody know that that's a reference to Plato, who writes in the middle of the Republic. It's about book 7. He writes. Is that what you're talking about? The
oh yeah.
the the allegory of the cave. I would invite everybody that's listening to read that if you ever get the chance. It's easily found online. Um, you can find it a lot of places, even just go on YouTube where you're finding us now. I mean, with the podcast, we have it on YouTube as well, but just look in, put in Plato's Cave. That's all you need to do. It's just remember Plato apostrophe S-C-A-V-E, Plato's Cave, and it'll come up. I guarantee it.
Change
It's
your
a
life.
it's a wonderful story. It's about these people that are kind of born in this cavern. They're watching shadows. One gets freed, so on and so forth. It's a beautiful story. Even older than 2 of the 5 of the world's great religions, namely Christianity and Islam. So fascinating stuff. Go on, Tyler. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's excellent. And that's actually where I felt like I was. I was in that cave. I was chained. And the reason being was the very first week of college when I first got started, I actually got called to the hospital. And my dad was in ICU.
Oh,
Um, Completely fine the day before. And
really?
this particular day, I just go in and he is completely 180 from the way he was the day before.
Hmm.
Long story short, because it is definitely a long story. My dad very unexpectedly passed away.
I'm
That,
sorry. My
yes,
condolences. I don't
thank you.
think I somehow I that had slipped my mind, so I apologize.
No,
My
yeah,
heart to you, man. My heart.
it's fine because the big thing is that I went into my very first philosophical experience, and I was at the darkest, most vulnerable time of my life, and I definitely had a lot of questions. Why? What will I do next? All of this stuff,
Mhm.
and very uncertain as well. So just going in and reading directly from the source material, philosophy, kind of found me out of that rut. I would typically,
Interesting.
yeah. So the thing is that it took a couple weeks, but after I had explored some concepts, I would go home and kind of just forget about the class for a couple seconds. And then I would sit there and really start thinking about what we had talked about that day or what I had read that day. And I found myself doing
Mhm.
extensive research on my own.
That's
And
interesting.
yes, and I would talk to a lot of friends and family. I was like, here's a concept, what is beauty? What is truth? All these kind of ideas I had been thinking about and exploring, kind of sort of reawakened me out of this kind of like rut that I had gotten
Mhm.
in after my
Mhm.
dad's
Mhm.
unexpected passing.
Mhm.
So, you know, overall, after questioning myself, I kind of found over the course of the coming months, after this, what it was like to truly live and what it was like to be inspired, reawakened, enlightened, all of these things. And from that moment on, I was like, I could sit here and be upset, and I know that no matter what I do, it's going to bring my dad back. But the best thing I
Mhm.
could probably do to honor him is to be able to live the best life that I could possibly live.
Oh, that's beautifully said. Let me have you repeat that. So the best way, go on it, go at that again, because
Yeah. So
that's a beautiful thought for everybody to hear, including myself.
absolutely. So the best way that I could honor my dad is to actually be the best version of myself and
Mm,
really live on his behalf. Even though he's not on earth
mm,
anymore, I could
mm,
still try to be the best version of myself, the best person, always striving and living that philosophical lifestyle that, really deeply inspired me at the time.
yes.
And through that, it has transformed me, the way I think, the way I feel. Everything about it has really come full circle in my life. And I feel like philosophy, I didn't just find philosophy, but philosophy found me. And it is a big
Hmm.
defining factor of who I am today. Being able to speak about ideas and question and
Mm,
wisdom, all these things have really opened my eyes. And,
mm.
I feel like I'm seeing clearer than ever before now.
That's beautiful, man. That is gorgeous. That's what I have found too. I mean, not to just tag in onto this story, but that is so enriching of my heart to hear, because when we when you said about your dad, when you lost your dad, that it it was almost a calling to live out the best life in honor of him. It's to enable him to live through you, through the pride that you know he would have of you and for you, and all that you're accomplishing, all that you're doing as a person, as a man who's thinking about these great ideas of life, pondering them, figuring out what it is to live the great life, doing it, following it through, just pursuing it. I love that how you said that's what you were taking away from the courses, and that was all that I mean, that's all that I ever do. And I appreciate that. I'm glad it hit you. I'm glad it,
Yes.
it touches your life, because I mean, there's this quote by Emerson. He said, the lives of great people all remind us that the spiritual is greater than any material force, and that ideas rule the world. It's almost like a two-pronged idea. And this is Ralph Waldo Emerson. He's an American philosopher from the 19th century, writer, speaker. He was very eloquent. People would come, by well, a lot of people would hear him speak. He was almost like this person, those self-help people, that like we have going around,
Oh,
and
yeah.
these public speakers that will make you pay some money just to sit in their presence, and they'll tell you these things, right? So he had that sort of persona. That's what he did. I'm not saying his work was self-help, because it was about character building. And this this is an interesting thought. When he says this, he's 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 bringing to mind a couple of ideas that always have lived with me, that the spiritual is greater than any material force. In other words, my soul, my mind is greater than my body. I mean, that's kind of a thought. It's an ancient thought. It's a religious thought, spiritual thought, it's philosophical thought. That what goes on in the inside is greater than what happens on the outside, right? That's kind of interesting, isn't it? So your father passes away, but only bodily. Isn't that beautiful?
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And
That's
that's
beautiful,
the
isn't it?
most perfectly said. I think that the biggest thing was the challenge was mostly the fact that I knew that I couldn't necessarily bring him back in any way, shape, or form. But I knew that bodily he wasn't here, but I was like, I could still continue on his work they had already put in, living for
Mhm.
him. And that's really the only option I had. But honestly,
Mhm.
it was probably the best option that I went with. And I think that if I would have
Mhm.
stayed the way I was before after he had passed, it definitely would have led me down a really depressive, upsetting,
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
cave kind of path.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
me choosing this lifestyle, I think really would be mostly what he would have wanted.
I love you
Uh,
saying that. That is great. Choosing. It's your
mhm.
choice. It's not like something you're like you don't have anything else better to do with your life. I mean, it's not
Right.
like that. It's not like I was made to do this. I
Exactly.
choose. I choose. It's like I don't know. That is so great. It is so great. It's a choice. You got to make the choice. You got to make the choice that I'm going to become great. I'm going to do this. I'm
Mhm.
not going to let these other factors, bodily, physical factors, ruin the spirit within me. I will not
Right.
let them touch that heart of mine because I know what I know. I know what I feel, and I'm going to go with that. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So when you have this that wonderful idea of well, it's the idea of resurrection, isn't it? I mean, it's the resurrection of the like springtime comes, like at Easter, where the in the Christian faith, there's this the celebration of the resurrection. I had this guy say to me one time in class, and this was really an interesting point because I wanted to get back to that second part from Emerson that I was reminded of when you were talking. So he said, and this sounds really hotly controversial. If you first hear it, it would be something that you could never say probably in a church, but that's okay. I mean, a lot of things you can't because, and I've got to be careful here that I'm not trying to be offensive, but we have to think deeply about what's taking place and what's going on in life instead of taking this very shallow, shadowy approach that's just, well, I'm not really sure. We've got choices, we've got a spirit, we've got if we want it, we have an undying passion for life that we can have. So here's what he said. It was actually I think, an intro to philosophy class, at when I was teaching, and he said, and this sounded real controversial, but it was fantastic. He said that Jesus died and rose again. Sure, he said. He said that's fine. That's a great idea. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah. And he just sort of shrugged his shoulders. But what that has to do with me, he said, I have no idea. He said, except that it brings to mind there it was, the ideas that is being spoken about. And a lot of people will go and say, well, that solidifies the legitimacy and all of that. But the ideas are powerful. And that's what Emerson's great point is. Ideas rule the world. It's not the physical. The spiritual is greater than any physical force. I don't care what happens physically in history. But that idea, see it? Isn't that interesting? I mean, that's just really, really powerful. What are you thinking about that, Tyler? I know your history and BG, come on in here too, my friend. I mean, I'm just sitting. I'm
I'm
just
taking it
keep on
in.
talking here, but
Yeah.
it's a real. That's a hotbed thought. Um, I asked one time. I'm just kind of thinking about things that have happened in ministry or have really happened in questions of faith and the spirit. I heard from a theologian one time. He said, if and here was the question: if heaven and hell did not exist, would you still be a follower of your faith? right? And he was specifically talking to Christians, but you could apply it to anybody. If there was no heaven or hell, if there's nothing after the grave, would you still follow your faith? And I asked that question in the middle of a church service, and you could have heard a pin drop when I asked it, because it just went like solid, like, I'm not sure. And I was actually challenged with that after the service. But what it gets down to is this question. It helps us to confront what you were sharing, Tyler, with your with what your dad, you charmingly said about your dad, that he's not, there's nothing I can do to change that reality. He has passed away. I cannot bring him back. I cannot do anything about it, but I will choose to live greatly. So it's all about the dash. Let the end take care of itself. I think that was the meaning of the question. You need to focus upon the ideas that are giving you the charge of life, and that's how you're honoring the people that you love. That's really interesting. Is that am I kind of am I on to the right track of the way you're thinking about that?
Oh yeah, 100% for sure. I don't know. It's like the reality of what it was kind of like living through like my own truth, I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah.
finding that. So,
I
and
like
very
how,
interesting that you
yeah,
mentioned the like the church kind of like without religion. Like if like you would you live that kind of like lifestyle if you don't have any kind of like the long-term gratification from it. So
or the
I do like,
long-term pay. Yeah.
yes, yes,
It's the
yes.
paycheck. It's the paycheck.
Right. Yeah.
As I've always said, I mean, I say this with a sort of tongue in cheek, and it's not meant to be offensive, but if all you're doing this for is either paycheck or fire insurance, we're off put here. I mean,
Yeah.
because as one student said, the reason we're doing it, the reason we're being kind, the reason we're thinking about life, the reason I'm helping the person that along life's way to encourage them, or the reason I'm going into the hospitals, or the reason I'm helping the animal that's in need along the road, is to sort of get the attention, like I'm doing that to get like the brown, not the brownie point, but yeah, most, yeah, get the get the attaboy. And
Yeah.
if that's all I'm working for is the attaboy, then I mean, there's nothing wrong in the attaboy, but if all I'm there for is to get rewarded, see it, I mean, you're not doing it for kindness, you're doing it for business.
Do it
Right?
for the clout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it becomes not transformation, but transaction. And I think that's a very, that's souring it to me. That is really souring it to me. And I think that when it's like stepping into a philosophy class or doing philosophy just simply because you want to look the part, like you said, you want to
Yes.
look pompous. See it? I want to be a
Mhm.
philosopher. Oh, philosophy. Oh, Plato would say, and you have to strike this very pompous, arrogant attitude. And it's a shame, because these people were not arrogant when they wrote these things. I mean, they were human beings. I've often had people touch their skin. And I said, you feel that right there? You feel your bone, just feel your hand. I said, you feel that skin, you feel that flesh, you feel that bone. So guess what? Those people that you're following, they had that too, right there. They had that too. They're not like these extraordinary beings that have no sense of reality. And I don't want to be so passionate about that that it obscures what I'm actually talking about. But the power of thinking deeply and choosing that about life, that I will go on, I will make a difference, I'm going to live in such a way that my loved ones will be proud of me. I mean, I'm going to live. It's like it's like I'm going to go into that hospital room, not because I'm going to get some brownie points. It's because I'm going to do this in the right way with a heart of compassion and love and kindness and truth and lover of beauty and courageous. And I will live in that way. I will live for that dash. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I just, it's almost like that realm of thinking, Tyler, what we were talking about yesterday, when we were talking about the exchange between Jesus and Pontius Pilate. And the reason I'm saying that, of course, it's Easter it's Easter weekend when we're making this, not to date this, but suffice it to say, it'll work all around the year. But that exchange between Pontius Pilate, who is a political figure, and Jesus, who is a spiritual leader, clash in that one question. And Pilate asked Jesus the simple question. It's found in John's writings about the teaching of Jesus. It's called the Gospel of John, if you don't know it, but he says at this one part, what is truth? And the most, I think it's astoundingly beautiful, though even in my own career and thought, I've skipped over it. There's no answer from Jesus. Even though the exchange had been back and forth a little bit about truth being, I don't serve this world. The people that follow me know the truth about what I speak about. See, there again, the idea of truth. See it. So Pilate comes up to him. He's facing Pilate. It's the trial before Jesus will die. And Pilate says, what is truth? And there's in the old vernacular, there's no word in red, man. There's nothing after that. There's nothing, at least in John's. It's like, and I've wondered this, I get kind of excited about this. Would he have even understood it if he had even spoken the first word? Because isn't Pilate in the cave? There it is.
Yeah.
See, he's watching the shadow. He's paying attention. I don't mean to be sermonic here today, but I think if we get this, if we could just understand this, and when you said that ignited something within me, Tyler, when you were talking about your choice to philosophy, though it sounded very pompous, in taking the course. When you understand that it's about the love of wisdom, it's just about that.
It reminds me about how we kind of like sacrifice our own beliefs just to match those of like others, in fear of kind of like losing that following or losing like connection, friends, all that kind of stuff. I think that's kind of like what Pilate was doing. Would you think so?
Yeah, say that again.
So like, yeah, well, I'm thinking like, okay, so Pilate was, obviously the one who had chose to sacrifice Jesus. So asking about that truth there, I feel like a lot of times whenever somebody has like a belief, they are willing, excuse me, but they are willing, like out of kind of like fear of losing like that leadership or connection or like friendships, or even like in like modern times, acquaintances around any kind of like personal gains they could possibly get from something. Basically, we sacrifice what we truly believe and what is reality based off of, the fear of kind of like, I guess you would say, missing out.
I see that.
BG, go on. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to jump in. I see that happening in all of our lives. I think we sacrifice temporal things for the things that are eternal and the things that really matter, the things that are really deep. And I love how Tyler a few minutes ago talked about, how it was an awakening for him. It was an unchaining of him from the darkness, from the cave. I think Pilate standing in front of, Jesus and asking, what is truth? I could just hear it. I could almost hear the disdain, what is truth? and truth
Mhm.
was standing right in front of him. He
Mhm.
was, because Jesus had said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. And so truth was there, but I just don't think he could see it because, again, he was blinded. He was in the darkness. And it's one of those things where sometimes we don't see the authentic things in life because we have so much temporal stuff in front of us. It's stuff that doesn't matter, all that junk and garbage and baggage that's in our lives that keeps us
Mhm.
from seeing the actual truth of the world. And when Tyler had his dad pass away, and it was an awakening for him to say, I'm going to live life to the full. Same thing for me. Just beginning to see that life was not as fulfilled as I thought it should be. I'm going to think deeper. I'm going to go deeper. And not only does Tyler get a chance now to honor his dad and his memory by living a greater, more authentic, truthful life, but he also gets to inspire his family now and future generations and people who, that's the power that we have. And one more thought. You guys were talking about how from the politician side,
Mhm.
sometimes we get more concerned about our role. We get more concerned about our position, and that philosophy has somewhat become pretentious, maybe in our mind and our thought. Religion's the same way. We have become very pretentious in religion
Yes, yes,
also,
yes. Good point on
because
that.
because philosophers never intended to be famous or to be haughty or to be high-minded in any way. Our founding fathers never did either from a religious and our faith standpoint. Abraham, the great father of the faith, and others who have gone before us didn't say, I'm going to be in the Bible one day and I can't wait to be talked about and have these great stories written about me.
Yeah, I can't
They were
wait for you to
struggling.
talk about me.
Yeah, they were struggling through their lives as well, finding the way
That's funny.
and going their direction. So
Yeah,
all of us are in the same struggle. We all have the same
yeah.
challenges and struggles in our lives. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to look deeper and to see, first of all, what are we about? What do we want to be? Who do we want to be in our best authentic self and truth? And then share that with others and let them have their own experiences, because it's really the only way you're going to have that eye-opening moment, I think, in your life.
I wondered about when you said that, not to pick on Pilate,
Yeah.
but he's an interesting figure because I wondered, that question, like, what is truth? Where he had I'm just going to speak about this. There's always a time, I believe, in everybody's life that they have a choice of whether to retain the beauty that they knew, if they've had, if they've had those, a blessing of a good life growing up, that there's something that they remember back to when these ideas were powerful, when, in the eyes of a child, knowledge and idea, and I don't speak about that ideas academically, I'm just talking about imagination, wonder, the sense of like being alive is so precious. And you have eventually, unfortunately, so in the modern age, you have to make a choice whether you're going to retain that or go down the other path, which is the choosing of the physical, the choosing of the shadows, the choosing of that which becomes popular, that is, which is expedient, forgive this word, politically cool, power, influence, wealth, those things that a child, when you first encounter the child, do not pay attention to. They don't pay attention to anything like that. But eventually, they may make the choice to do that, and it's a hard choice not to make, to go differently. It's like Aristotle said, that we by nature desire to know. I mean, by nature, we're philosophers. We're by nature, we want to become great. It's like that little girl. I've often told this story I heard one time, and this little girl is in the back of a classroom and she's drawing while the teacher is teaching. And the teacher gets kind of irritated by this, and she walks back and she said, "What are you drawing?" You know, she's talking, and this little girl keeps on drawing. She said, "What are you drawing?" And the little girl said, "I'm drawing the face of God." And she just goes back to drawing. And the teacher just scoffs at it. Said, "Nobody knows what God looks like." And the little girl looks up and she said, "They will in a minute." Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
They will in a minute. So see that courage, that imagination, that wonder, that just like, I got this. I get that. I got this. And that idea of Aristotle, that we all come out wanting to know things, wanting to ponder life. I mean, life is beautiful. I mean, take a child. I mean, one of the most beautiful sights we have are children playing and just running free and enjoying themselves in nature, and the wonder of spring and summer, and even in the autumn, with the leaves in the winter snows, all of this, just celebrating life, celebrating what it is, living very simply, but with truth, beauty, courage. I mean, don't we hate it when in the element, wow, don't we hate it when children are bullied, and instead of courage, their fear, that awful poison of the soul, has come into them, and they're afraid to stand up, they're afraid to speak up, and they cower away in a corner, and it ruins the life. It's fear that you're not popular. It's fear that you don't have this and the other. Again, the poison. See, it's the poisoning. And what's going on here with this Pilate thing, I believe, and I'll just call him Pontius Pilate and give him honor. I mean, he was in a very powerful position. But I wonder, even in that thing of what is truth, I don't know how he said that, but I wondered if he remembered back to when truth was important. Because he goes on later and he tells everybody, all the religious leaders, I don't have a problem with him. But he knew it was politically expedient for him to keep the peace, because they were wanting this done. And to keep it politically, which politicians are, they're good about this. They'll sacrifice the one in order to save the many, and in order to save the reputation, and totally lose. And I'm not just picking on politicians. A lot of people, the people do this. You'll sacrifice that one to keep that power, that position, and then convince yourself that you've done the right thing. All to be turned around, that you've done the most dastardly thing, is that you've sacrificed truth, beauty, courage, wonder, goodness on the altar to be popular, expedient, to have wealth, to have power, to have influence. And then the list goes on. And so what Tyler was sharing is about choosing that pathway. He could have chose that. I mean, I'm speaking like he's in the third person here. He's sitting right here, but Tyler, when you chose that, see, it's like, it's the choice of choices that we all make. It's live or die. It's move or sit still. It's get up or sit down. It's to move on towards your great tomorrow, or just drown in yesterday.
Lead or follow.
There it is. Boom. Lead or follow.
Tyler,
or just simply get out of the way.
Get out of the way. That's right. That's a third choice.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Tyler, how, for those who are, there's a lot of people out who would hear maybe these words and hear us talking today and then think, so what? They I don't know what, like Dr. Newman said a few minutes ago, what does that have to do with me? I know Jesus died, and I know he lived again, and I know he rose again, right. But what does that mean? I'm curious from your standpoint. I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but how has that moment where you realized there was a deeper truth, a more meaningful life to live, a deeper way of thinking. How does that change a person, and how did it change you? How do you face the day differently now than you did before?
Yeah. So before my dad died, I was always like somebody who liked to question. And I never really understood what kind of benefit that would have for me as a person, or what was like the reality of that. So after my dad had passed away, and I was in the moment of my life where I wasn't really feeling very productive with my life, feeling very good about myself. I think the biggest thing that changed was knowing that it's good to question, and it's good to understand, and it's good to try to come to like terms with things. And I think the biggest thing is being able to remain positive through everything, and be very, very to some degree, I guess, low stressed, and to understand like the concepts of the Stoics. Even, I'm not saying that I am Stoic, but being able to maintain that kind of balance in life. And that's the biggest thing that's changed for me ever since.
I hoped that you would say that, because I think it's that those words that you said, it's okay to question, is what
Mm-hmm.
drives me every day. I have to remind myself, it's okay if I don't know the answer. It's okay if I have questions. It's okay if I dig deeper. It's okay if I challenge things a bit. That's
Mm-hmm.
just because of being in religion most of your life. Sometimes you're trained not to question. You're only trained to to accept and to take. And so it's sometimes a challenge. And I'm glad you said that, because it's a good phrase. It's okay to question
Mm-hmm.
things. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, it's very enlightening and very freeing to do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
It's
And
the
there's a
whole
lot of
idea.
closed-minded
Yeah.
people out there that would tell you that that's not the way to do.
Right.
Especially, I know a lot of in religions and stuff too. It's not okay to question, just like it was really not okay for, um, what's his name? The pilot. Yeah, pilot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was I was like,
Yeah. The
I had to get
pilot.
it, but the
The
pilot.
pilot.
Yeah.
To question what is truth. And that
Mm.
was,
Yeah.
that was his reality at the time.
Correct.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. Did I interrupt you, BG?
No, not at all.
The That's interesting that you say that. It was that sense. Say that how you said that again, Tyler, because I want to hear that one more time.
Yeah, so basically, just like Pilate, to him, his truth was like grounded in the reality at the moment. So to him, it was okay to question what is truth.
Mm-hmm. The idea that was the expedient, that was the practical view. That's, I mean, it's what's going to get us to the practical end. And what are the practical ends? Well, Socrates always talked about these. It's the practical end of wealth. It's the practical end of sort of influence, power, like influence, or just the practical end. As Cato, you mentioned the Stoics, right? When Cato the Younger, Joseph Addison, let me go back on something. Cato the Younger was the last holdout for the Roman Republic against the influence of Julius Caesar, who is the first one, who is the one who takes over, who becomes the Caesar, who becomes the emperor, who overtakes the Senate, who becomes the powerhouse that gets this whole thing started. It's interesting that when Jesus is born, Augustus is Caesar. So in the days of Caesar Augustus, see it, and in the days of Caesar Augustus, see it posits it in history, in the days of this power. And there's that struggle that's implicit right in the very story, that as it starts out, we've got a contrast going to appear, right? We could talk, I know it's not Christmas time, but that peace on earth. See, the Romans were not known for passing out flowers, right? They're not going into all the lands and saying, we come with flowers on our helmets, to give you some flowers to plant. You're coming to conquer. So it's not peace on earth. But there's this contrast that is coming on with that. So you get that idea, like, what is the well, let me just say this, and I'll say it very bluntly. In that world, truth, beauty, goodness, and courage, those great ideas that enable and empower the individual lives and the lives of so many, even in our pompous philosophy, they don't have really a place in that world. Truth is what you make of it. Truth could be a lie. Goodness is what gets me to the next end result. Courage is only good enough to, good enough that I can make a move on that, but not good enough that it's going to carry me away with truth in my heart that I will stand and challenge. And then beauty is only the skin deep thing. It's only how I can use it to get the vote. So see, it's really a powerful. You said it best, Tyler, when you said, I'm going to make a choice. And it's always the choice. It's the choice to remember the beauty, the courage, the goodness, the truth that you sought as a child. And isn't that a beautiful thing about, not to keep quoting Christian thought here, but isn't that a beautiful thing when Jesus said, let the children come to me, for such is theirs. I mean, theirs is the kingdom of God. I'm trying to think of the old King James line on that, but theirs is the kingdom of God. See it, let the child come to me, for theirs is the kingdom of God. And I think there's a much deeper understanding of that than there's just a cute Sunday school saying that we can put up on a board. I think there's something really deep and profound that goes all the way through the quest for the great ideas that transform humanity throughout all of history. I think that's a linking in, because Jesus is linking into that great impulse. And I don't think that's by accident, nor do I think that that's odd. It's the way we do it. It's the choice. It's great. Man, that's so powerful.
Sure.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Tyler, if people are wondering, who've come up in Christianity like you have, like I have, like Dr. Newman has, how do you reconcile? How do you balance the struggle of, not being able to think deeply or not being encouraged to, and questioning things, with now your new way of thinking? How do you balance those? How do you reconcile that? How do you live that way?
Ooh, loaded question, because
It is. I know.
whenever I was growing up, it was always never question like God's righteous decisions.
Me too.
Never, right. So I never really was. I was one that wanted to question, and I quickly realized whenever I did choose to question those concepts and beliefs, out of curiosity, not out of challenging, because I think there's a big difference between challenging somebody on something
Yeah.
and being genuinely curious as to why something is the way it is. So mine came from a very innocent standpoint of, why are things the way they are? Everything in terms of Christianity, the Bible, Jesus. And I really wasn't given too much of a response that I would expect. It's kind of just like very cut and dry, typical Christian like answers. Now that I think like, you know, philosophy to me does go hand in hand with theology a lot of times. And there's a lot of, you know,
Hmm.
Jesus was a philosopher. So I always look back and I kind of tell myself with the struggles that I have with questioning, you know, God, Jesus, or anything I read in the Bible. The biggest thing is I would always say to myself, you know, I feel like Jesus or God would question these things as well. He always was, I felt like too. So I kind of just like am rooted within that with myself. I'm like, you know, it's okay to question. It's not going to really be judged because we're only human after all.
Mhm. Yeah, I
That
like
that
that.
is a that's a powerhouse, what you just said. I love that. I love that. See, that can ignite that can ignite change. I mean, that's ignition, that's fire, right? Just what you
Yeah.
just said.
It's about our
Questioning is,
it's
yeah.
about our approach, isn't it? It's about how we approach things, that we're doing it
Mhm,
from the correct
mhm.
heart, from the
Right.
correct intention.
Absolutely. I
You said
love
you were
that.
very intent, you were very innocent in your intentions. And so we don't question in order to destroy and tear down
Exactly.
and break. We're questioning in order to build up and to strengthen and to find the absolute truth. And if we approach it that way, then there is great gain for us, I think, over
Oh
time.
yeah.
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 Like to ask the questions, like you take the I've often done this in class, and Tyler might remember this, where you take your greatest word that you can think of, the greatest word that you can think of, and then you ask the question, what is that? Or why do I believe that? And why should that be the greatest one for me? Or what should I know about that? Or and it just these questions circle, but you know, you give that question or you give that word and it just drops. But if you ask like like take the word truth we've been talking about, you say, well, truth, you know, but true, what is truth? But say that in a very curious way. Say it in a way that's not cynical. Say it in a way that you, because in that cynicism, you've already decided what it is. See, you've decided that it's simply a word. It's a technique. It's just a useless thing. But the truth shall set you free.
Yeah.
See it? So I mean, there is a contrast. Or like, what is beauty? Well, beauty is just, I don't know. You know, you'll get people that say, I don't know what it is. It's just, I don't know. I don't know. It's beauty. I don't know. I don't know. And that's where it'll end. I don't know. But what is it? What is that? A child will ask that, not because they're wanting to just catch you up on your argument and say that doesn't fit, or challenging you and say, you know, you're not making any sense right now. They're asking you because they're curious, because it's not the, as BG you so adequately reminded us, it's not, and Tyler was talking about this as well, that it's not about the dismantling. We're not trying to destroy you. We're trying, we're allowing our wonder to carry us to the greatness of life and to become better, to become great, to become excellent. And we have to know something. There's something beautiful about interacting with this world that makes life what it is. And to start questioning that in a way, just start there. What is something? Why do you believe that way? Or what should you be believing? Just something. That that great word of should is a beautiful thought. It's the word of we always, in our pompous way, Tyler, as you were saying, you know, the arrogance of philosophy, just the very word. I asked a professor one time who taught. I was teaching a course on what was called, now see, listen to this pompous class, social and political philosophy. I mean, how dry bone can you get on you know, social and political philosophy is just, oh, it's really a heavy, heavy. I mean, I would never buy the title of that book. I mean, social and political. I mean, that's not going to be a
Love it.
bestseller. I mean, we got to do something with this title, man. I
It
mean,
had to
There
have
was
a
no
really good
copy
cut.
sold.
That's right.
what's
Yes.
that? What you say?
So there was
Tyler?
absolutely no copies of it sold.
Zero on scale of 1 to 10. It's like in the negative.
You owe
I
us money.
That's funny. Yeah, it just did me in. That's the only title I can think about. Social political. But anyway, it sounds arrogant even if you were taking it. What are you taking? Well, I'm taking social and political philosophy, and you can almost hear the yawn. I hate the title of that. So I always try to change titles of courses. I mean, in the universities aren't known for their for their creativity in the titles of courses, but they should be, but they don't, and that's the reason we're here. We're trying to get some thought out to the world. Come on, man. There's some beautiful things here, and we're not arrogant. I just want to add that we're not arrogant. But anyway, so he taught political science, and I asked him. I said, "What is the difference between political science and social and political philosophy to you?" And this is beautiful. He said, "I teach what is, you teach what should be." I loved that. That charmed my heart. I walked out of there a little bit stronger in my step, shall we say. I straightened up and I thought, yeah, that's what I'm after. I'm not after like what is. I know the what is. I know the power stuff. I mean, going back to the question we've been hammering, what is truth? I know the practicality of that. But man, isn't it sweet to think, and isn't it inspirational to think, and then is it wondrous to think, how should this be? That's a great question. Yeah. It's not like what I'm living. I got that. It's like, how should I live? And that, Tyler, that was the question that you went to. Mm-hmm. It's, I know.
And that's exactly, I would find myself questioning that. I was like, what should I do?
Yeah.
How should I be?
Yeah. And that's then, there it is. That's the awakening. That's beautiful, man.
For sure.
I get it.
That is philosophy.
It is. It is. That's it. That's it. That's life. It's beautiful. It's knowledge. It's truth. It's goodness. It's beauty. It's courage. It's everything. It's great stuff, man.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
What a great dialogue today, Tyler.
It is. Oh yeah.
Thanks for being with us. It was good to have you, brother.
Thanks thank you. Thank you, my friend. It's been good to have you today. Yeah, it's been awesome. Great. Yeah, I appreciate you. We'll have you back on sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to do it.
We'll talk more on this. Yeah. We always have an open invitation, Yeah. The dialogue never ceases. It's always, and we don't shut out people from the dialogue. We want people involved in the dialogue. If this has ignited you, if this is making you think, we want to hear. And so, my brother, I appreciate you coming by today, and we'll have you on again. Yeah, it's great. Great. Open invitation, my friend.
Great. Well, I'm not going to do my official close. I'm just going to let it stop there. I think, Dr. Newman, I'll just let it. I think that'll be fine. I won't do my little thing. We'll pre-record that and put that together.
That's right. That's right. We will. And I just want to tell everybody to make it beautiful and to have a beautiful days as we question and as we go on this great and wonderful journey. Thank you for today. Appreciate it. The dialogue.
Thanks again, Tyler.
Sure.
Thank you.